All right, welcome Facebook Live. We are here in Corvallis, Oregon, at the Corvallis Foundry. This is Biz Ed, and we're here to, as I mentioned to those in the room, bring actionable education to the businesses that are going to really change this world. The small business has a unique opportunity. We are not bound by all the red tape of big monsters out there. We can do the things that we want, but we don't always have the resources. So Biz Ed is here to kind of help fill in that and help us all, lift our businesses a little higher. Just with some practical, actionable education. Actionable education is stuff you can apply immediately to improve your business. So thank you all for being here. Our speaker today, Mark Herdering. I should have practiced that. Okay,
yeah.
Take two. Okay.
Don't sprain your tongue.
He comes all the way down. He travels all the way down from Beaverton, up in Portland area. Right in Portland. Okay.
My B&I is in Beaverton.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I kept saying Beaverton. My I just said Portland.
Basically the same thing.
All right. So his topic includes a little bit, or a good bit of appreciation marketing, and that attracted me because next week is what? Thanksgiving, right? So I was like, how can we mix appreciation? What place does it have in helping us grow our networks? And so called in an expert. So this is a little intro on Mark. After years of struggling in traditional sales, Mark built a business that reached $1 million in annual revenue in less than 3 years on a 62-cent per unit item. I hope he tells more about that. Using a unique referral action plan, his extensive networking ability has driven his professional accomplishments and has expanded his career portfolio to wearing the hats of speaker, writer, and business connector. Mark shares his passion for sharing the formula for appreciation marketing and building business by referral in his book, Hanging Out for a Living, which we have there. Facebook. Should have that in there. And I lost my place. His book, Hanging Out for a Living, a business fable about the philosophy, art, and strategy for building a referral-based business. Mark has been an independent business owner with sendoutcards.com since April 2005, where he serves as an executive marketing distributor. With rousing applause, please help me welcome Mark Herdering.
Rousing. Well, thanks, you guys. Before I start this, let me just tell you a little bit of story about where I come from. I'm a welder and a metal fitter by trade. When I got to a point in my life, I was probably about 29 or 30, when I had a calling that I could do better things. I really was, although I loved that work and I loved working with my hands, the idea of selling my life off for 20 bucks an hour, something about that just felt very wrong to me, and I felt like I was here to make a bigger difference in the world. So I decided to start my own business. I won't get too much into what that venture was, but I decided I was going to start networking. I heard that's what you're supposed to do. And so where does one go to start networking? Like if you're going to network, where would you go? What would be your first place to meet people? The Foundry would be one. That's the name of this place.
Yeah. Where people are.
Where people are.
Yeah.
So most people think, well, I'll just go to the local chamber of commerce. And so that's what I did. So first of all, I want to proudly say that you are looking at the very worst networker on the planet Earth. But I grew from that place. So that's what I feel qualifies me to share this information with you, is because I was able to go from that place to a place where I find it pretty easy to network now. So here's the story. I went to my very first networking event, and mind you, mentally, I was still a welder and a metal fitter. At the time, I worked for Rocketdyne, which we built the space shuttle main engines in Canoga Park, California. And I went to the Tarzana Chamber of Commerce. They were having a mixer at the Office Depot. And this is about 25 years ago. So I showed up dressed very much as a welder, not as a business person, because this is the way I'd always dressed. It was who I was. I thought I was being authentic. By the way, that early that afternoon, I decided to make myself some lunch, and I made myself a tuna sandwich. And I usually like to put celery in a tuna sandwich, but we're out of celery. My second go-to would be onion. There was no onion. So I looked around and there was some garlic, and I just chopped up some garlic. Steve knows that I like garlic. And so I chopped up some garlic, just raw garlic, and I threw it in that sandwich, and it was, you guys, it was awesome. If you ever want to have a really good tuna sandwich and you can handle it, it is awesome. And of course I brushed really, really well before I went to this networking event. So I showed up at this networking event, and I found that people were very standoffish, almost to the point of being rude. And I just thought, boy, this is just not a very friendly environment. And I was very, very fortunate that somebody who was a little bit bolder than the rest of the people that were in attendance pulled me aside. And he said, can I say something? Can I tell you something? And I said, well, sure. He goes, man, you stink. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, did you just eat some garlic? And I said, well, I had some garlic at lunch. And he goes, you reek. It's beyond the beyond. And I was, quite embarrassed. But he fortunately told me that, so that was a mistake I haven't made since, at least a mistake I hope I haven't made since. But that was my very first networking experience, so just know that that's where I'm coming from. And it's from that I was able to accomplish a few things, and I'm going to share with you how I did that. In the short period of time that I have, I'm going to kind of cram it in, so it's going to be a little bit intense, so let's just get going. So Drew specifically asked me to talk about appreciation marketing. That is a term that was sort of invented by my company, Send Out Cards. And my concern is that it's maybe overused and it's sort of lost its meaning. But to me, what it means is you're engaging people through appreciation, which means that you're taking a greater interest in them than you have in telling them about you. So serving people is what appreciation marketing is. If you come from an intention of serving others, as opposed to coming from a place of how do I generate revenue, you're going to find that the former is actually a much more effective way of doing business. So how do I serve people? So the appreciation marketing attitude really is first taking a greater interest in listening to others than you have in telling them about you. And the next thing would be leaving others, and this is a really important one, and this is one of the primary philosophies in the book. Leave others better than they were before they met you. If you learn nothing else in what I shared with you today, and if you just take those and really embrace those two things, you'll do very well. Because you're going to find that not that many people in business follow those philosophies. But I assure you, you're going to find that business is much easier to do when you come from a place of genuine service and leaving others better than they were before they met you. And I'll go over with you a little bit how to do that. So first, I'm going to cover, and I'm right your way, aren't I? Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to cover the mechanics. That's the philosophy, but there are some mechanics to networking. And so that's what I'm going to share with you right now. So the first piece to networking is going to be identifying who it is that you want to network with. And then find and engage them. So this is the genie. So I want you guys to imagine for just one moment, a genie came out of a lamp. And this is in terms of your own business. So the genie is before you, and the genie is going to grant you one wish. And that wish is an ongoing stream of your ideal client. Now, something you need to know about genies is that they're not very bright. They cannot give you what you want. They can only give you exactly what you ask for. There's a big difference. Okay? So what I'd like to do is have you guys describe for me your ideal client. So, Drew, who would be an ideal client for you?
Ideal clients for me whether it's for building a website or for being a speaker or participant, in Biz Ed, is a person who kind of has a superhero, or super power. They are a hero because they have a superpower. Mm-hmm. I mean, it might be a consultant, it might be an educator, but they are. They're in the world to pass on their superpower and help other businesses. So, okay.
So who here could introduce somebody to Drew based on what he just said? That's kind of what I thought. Mm-hmm. That's okay. So who else? Who here knows who it is that they want to serve? So Drew, thank you for piping in. Yes.
Well, people that don't have bands going to.
People who don't have bands but want to be in bands. So musicians who want to be in a band. Okay, so they're looking for bandmates. And some chemistry, I would assume. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So-
a better answer than mine.
Yeah,
They'll be
well,
able to
there's
play
nothing wrong with
together.
your answer. by
Oh,
the way.
yeah.
They'll be able to play together and see if they
Yeah.
fit.
Okay, very cool. So no, there was nothing wrong with your answer, but my
Mhm.
question was who could refer somebody to you based on what you just said.
Mhm, yeah.
And I knew that we'd get some blank stares, and that's perfectly fine. Your answer was as good, if not better, than what 99.9% of people who were asked that question would be.
I mean, I have some gifted friends, but don't get me wrong, but.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so it's very important to be very specific. So I'm going to go over a little bit with you about how to identify your ideal client. All right, so just jumped ahead a little bit. So I want you to imagine your ideal client is someone you have to make up. You have to invent your ideal client. So I just made one up before I got here, which would be a plumber, because when I sold Yellow Pages advertising for a short time, plumbers were great Yellow Page advertisers, as were attorneys. Those are probably the two best, personal injury attorneys and plumbers. And they would always buy the back and the book and the full page ad. So they were good clients. So I was looking for a plumber. But that's still pretty vague. So I need to be a little bit more specific. So I want you to imagine that we're looking for a plumber here in Oregon, because I was not in Oregon at that time. So where are they located? Where is your ideal client located? And when I say that is, where would you want them to be? This is the client that you are inventing. So let's just say, for the sake of this, that we're looking for plumbers somewhere in the Eugene to Salem I-5 corridor. So that's fairly geographically specific. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are they looking for you? Thus the eyeballs. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right. But are they looking for you? So if you're looking for a client, wouldn't you prefer to have a client that is specifically looking for you? They have a need for your service?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good thing to have, right? So again, you get to invent this. So you want to add as much detail to this as you possibly can. By the way, tell me about their business. Are they incorporated? Are they solopreneur? Is it gender specific? All of those things. Is there a number of employees that might be important for you to serve this company? Is there an amount of revenue that they generate that might make them more specific to your particular way of serving them? So these are all the things that you want to incorporate when you are inventing your ideal client. And by the way, everyone in here could probably come up with several ideal clients. So we only get to invent one at a time. That's what this formula is about. And then finally, can they afford your service? What's the point of looking for an ideal client if they're not in a position to afford your service, right? So those are just some of the things that I would incorporate into inventing an ideal client. Does anybody want to chime in as to what else they would add to this? Like the problem they have that you solve? What would be a problem Drew, what's a problem somebody has that you could solve for them?
With website, well, if they don't have a web presence, you can't find them online,
Okay.
or if their website is just not getting results.
Okay, great. Why does somebody need a website?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, it can bring validation for some. It just that it might not be seen as a valid company or entity, without a website.
Okay. So a website would build some legitimacy.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What would be another reason why somebody would have a website?
Why they would have a website? Well, you can sell directly off the website.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to reach people
Mhm.
who would buy your product or service. You can reach those people directly through your website.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And where are those people?
Where are they?
Yeah.
Well, they could be anywhere on the globe, but they could also be in a specific location, like
So
similar to Eugene to Salem I-5 corridor. That you could be that specific too.
okay, great. So something you need to know about networking is people have a very short attention span. So if at all possible, when you tell people what you do, you want to include a problem and a solution and keep it to one sentence. So in your case, you bring worldwide audiences to unknown companies.
Yes.
That would,
That's a good way to put it.
yeah. And then, it doesn't say what you do, it just talks about the problem you solve. And it begs the question, how do you do that, right? All right. So that is what I call your ideal client. The ideal client is that person or entity that puts money in your pocket, the one that you have invented. And again, you can invent many of them, but one at a time. And for the sake of this, it's just going to be one. All right, so your ideal client is what I like to call the golden egg. Now, would you rather have a golden egg or a goose that lays a golden egg?
Goose.
The goose. Why would you want a goose rather than the egg itself?
Continued production.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to have a goose that just spits out the eggs, or I guess lays the eggs, than you having to run out and try to get those eggs, right? So the goose is your potential referral source. So you want to discover who your potential referral source might be. When I started my send out cards business, I was a little bit overwhelmed because I couldn't think of a business that couldn't use this service. So I had to get more specific. I mean, it was just on overwhelm, and I had to get focused. And I decided that residential real estate would probably be an ideal client for this particular service. And I joined an outfit called the Southland Regional Association of Realtors in Van Nuys, California. And that turned out to be a goose, because by nature of what that organization did, they had a network of people that wanted to use my service. Make sense? By the way, you know what else I found in that particular organization was I found mortgage brokers that wanted to use my service. I found, my photographer's going to try to get back there without killing himself. I found escrow people who wanted to use my service. I found exterminators and contractors that wanted to use my service. So as a result of painting a very narrow target, I was able to hit the other rings. Is that a metaphor that makes sense to you? Okay, so that's why I went for that particular organization, because by nature of what they did, they had a network of real estate brokers that could use my service, but I was able to find many others who wanted to use my service.
So what you're saying is that if you really focus narrow, you're actually expanding?
Yeah, what you're doing is you're bringing in far more qualified people that you would like to serve, rather than spending time with the wrong people. So that's why I say get a very narrow target. It's counterintuitive, but you want to have a very narrow target and then find out where you would find those people. It's either a person or an entity who by nature of what they do would have a network of your ideal clients. So in this particular case for me, it was the real estate association. But it could very well have been a real estate business coach, which is actually a little bit more part of that story. So the next piece of this is who by nature of what they do would have a network of your referral source. Well, if the goose is your potential referral source, then the granny goose would have to be the source of people, would have to be the source of your geese. And that's your target market when you're networking. So when we're networking, the idea is not to go out and specifically look for clients. That's like going out and hunting for eggs. What you're looking for is the granny goose, that person or entity who by nature of what they do has a network of people who have a network of people that would use your product or service. So one day I was looking through the association's newsletter, and there was a full-page ad for a Tommy Hopkins seminar. You guys may not know who Tom Hopkins is. Very successful real estate coach. He started in the real estate business. He sold 365 homes in his third year in real estate. And that was in Simi Valley, California in 1963, if I remember his book correctly. And 98% of that, he says, was by referral. 365 homes is a home a day.
Yeah.
And 98% of that was by referral. He attributed that success, to the habit his mother got him into of sending out 10 handwritten thank you cards every single day. Now you guys, that's just weird. I mean, it's wonderful that he would do that, but very few people on this planet would actually do that. But he did it, and he definitely benefited from that particular activity. So he attributed that success to writing those cards. When I saw that, I realized, oh my gosh, for my business, Tommy Hopkins would be my granny goose. See, Tommy Hopkins, by nature of what he does, has a network of real estate associations all over the world. He doesn't just speak to real estate associations in the US, he speaks to them in Canada, in Japan, in Australia, in the United Kingdom. This guy's huge. And so he has a network of real estate associations who by nature of what they do would have a network of my ideal client. Sadly, it turned out one of the guys that worked for Tommy Hopkins was also a referral partner with Send Out Cards. But it didn't change the fact that I figured something out there. Okay, make sense so far? And feel free to ask questions at any point. All right. So now let's talk about where we go to network. And by the way, everything that I'm talking about here can be applied digitally. Just please, please remember the philosophy that you've got to serve others, take a greater interest in others than you have in telling them about you. Allow them to ask about you. There was a saying a guy used to, in a previous company I was in, this guy used to say that his grandfather told him this. He said, only kiss the girls that are leaning towards you. And to me, what that meant was that allow people to ask the questions rather than you pursuing them. Does that make sense? So what you want to do is you want to be attractive. And the way to be an attractive person is to be interested in other people. When you are interested in other people, you become extremely interesting. So I'm going to use the standard networking event for this particular analogy. So think of a chamber of commerce, think of a business association, think of this particular room with a whole lot more people in it, mingling around and people trying to expand their networks. When you're networking, it is very important to think of your networking activities as gardening. So what would you expect to grow? Or I'm sorry, what would you expect to harvest from this garden? If you were to walk into that garden just as it is right now, what could you harvest from that garden?
Dirt.
Depends what's in the ground.
Yeah. So there's not really anything to harvest, is there?
Yeah.
Why?
There's no seeds planted.
Oh, there might be some.
That we know of.
That we know of, right? The gardening still has to be done. And when you're networking, you please think of it as gardening. You've got to serve the garden. So when you show up at a networking event, you have not earned the right to a harvest. But most people show up at a networking event trying to sell to other people when they haven't earned the right to do so. They haven't built that relationship. So relationship marketing is another way of saying appreciation marketing.
Versus like cold calling, basically, was what
Right.
we'd be doing. Sort of,
Right.
hey, random person, I want to sell you my stuff. Oh,
And
I
for
don't
those
care
people that
about
have
you,
the-
so why should
Yeah,
I?
for those people that have the stamina to do that, and I mean, that's just not. I've had to do that, and it is absolute horrible self-esteem killer to be a cold caller. But there are those people that are just really good at it, and I've talked to a couple of them that were just absolutely delightful on the phone, but they're very few and far between, and they're not going to get to me now. I'm really good at blocking those numbers. So remember that your networking event is an unplowed field of relational possibilities. But it's up to you to do that gardening, to build those relationships. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that. So the networking event is a garden to be cultivated. And so let's talk about being a gardener versus being a hunter. So the hunter is that person that shows up at the networking event or shows up online on whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever social media platform they may be using, Facebook, and they're trying to sell stuff. You ever see somebody's Facebook profile and you instantly know that they're just trying to sell something and you're afraid to even engage them? Yeah, so you're not worrying much about them. Now, if it's specifically a product page, that's what that's there for. But a personal page that people use to market stuff, it just doesn't feel right, does it?
Spammer.
Yeah, it just feels like there's an agenda there that's other than building genuine relationships. I can't remember where I heard this, so I did not invent this saying, but it sure makes a lot of sense. Somebody who's 10 times better at providing a product or service will never be half as good as those we care about. So it doesn't matter how good you are or how great your product is when you show up at that place of networking, whether it's online or offline. Unless you build that relationship, people really aren't going to care because you haven't earned their trust. That make sense? So this is about building trust. And another way of looking at this is you're a web developer. And I would imagine, Drew, that you're a really good web developer. You've been doing that for a while?
Been doing it for a while,
You've
yeah.
been doing that for a while. So you have a certain level of expertise. I imagine you've got a lot of education behind you and study in that field and a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever lost a client to their 16-year-old who
Oh, yeah.
wants to build websites?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Well, it's the relationship. It's what you're pointing at right there, yeah.
Right. Because they're gonna be 10 times better than somebody, they're 10 times better because of that relationship, even though they may be less than half as good at that, providing that particular service. So it really is all about the relationship.
Who you know, not what you know.
Well, but it's the nature of the relationship. So it's not just who, but it's how you engage those people in that relationship. So when we're networking, to use that gardening metaphor a little bit further, it's very important that you know what it is that you want to grow. So when I talk about the ideal client, ultimately that's what you want to grow. But to get that harvest, you have to grow those plants. So that is who it is that you want to meet when you're at a networking event. And I don't know what just happened.
Minimize.
Okay, let me get my glasses here.
I'm not sure.
That was pretty weird.
Tap on.
Okay, this is very weird. I'll get something. The problem is that my screen is so small that I can't see my cursor.
Oh, we can't see it either.
Right, all right. So I'm gonna unplug this for just a minute, and hopefully this won't mess up my presentation too much.
Just a brief intermission.
Talk amongst yourselves. Technology.
And we're back.
Yes. So it's important to know what you want to grow. In other words, know who it is that you want to meet. So before I moved to Portland, about 6 months before I made this, I knew I was going to move here. I was going to move up to Portland from Los Angeles. Before I did that, I knew that I had to start making some business inroads. So the very first thing that I did was I Googled Portland networking. Those are the only 2 words that I put in. One of the very first things that popped up was the Portland Business Alliance Leads Exchange. So Leads Exchange was a program that they held at that time, I believe it was the second and fourth Tuesdays, or Tuesday or Wednesday of the month, at the Rose Quarter. It was called the Rose Quarter back then, now it's the Moda Center. So at the Rose Quarter in Portland. And essentially it was speed networking. That's really what it was. So I spoke to a guy by the name of Jeff Jordan who worked at the Alliance. And I said, hey Jeff, I'm from LA, I'm going to be visiting Portland next week, and I see that you've got this event called Leads Exchange. I'm not part of your organization, but is that something that somebody like me could attend? He said, absolutely, I'd love to have you. I said, fantastic. I said, Jeff, I'm not from Portland, I don't know a soul. Would you be willing to introduce me around? What do you think he said?
Sure. Why not?
If you had somebody, Brennan, who was willing to introduce you around at a networking event, would that make it a little bit easier? Well, you can have that. All you have to do is ask. I promise you, if you go to an event like that, you call them up in advance, and you tell them, would you be willing to introduce me around? Absolutely. And by the way, why would Jeff be so enthusiastic about introducing me around? This shouldn't be that hard of a question. So he knew I was moving to Portland.
Oh,
He knew I specifically said I want to expand my business in the Portland area, which is why I'm coming up for this trip.
Make his clients money.
Yeah, he saw me as a potential client. So of course he would want me there, and he wanted me to have the very best experience possible. Now, I don't think he had an expectation that I would join, but he certainly wanted to make sure that I had the best experience possible so that I would be certainly encouraged to join. And by the way, I did eventually join. So I said, Jeff, that's great. By the way, Jeff, here's who I would like to be introduced to. So this is where we get to the specifics of the gardening. I said, Jeff, I would love to meet business coaches, especially real estate business coaches. Now, industry-specific business coaches would be great. I mean, there's a veterinarian business coach or a dental business coach or an automotive business coach. And by the way, you guys, there's a business coach for pretty much every business out there. So if you don't have a coach and you're trying to get your business off the ground, I would highly recommend investing in a coach who has been there and done that. It would save you an awful lot of time and an awful lot of energy. So I said that would be the first, because those are my granny geese. And then I said, by the way, I would also love to meet real estate brokers, and I would love to meet mortgage people, because those people could serve as both geese and pigs for me. So guess what he did? He ended up introducing me around, and I left there. There was at least 80 people at that networking event, and I only left with 5 business cards, which is exactly the way your networking should go. If you leave with a big stack of business cards that's too big to follow up on, what you've got is nothing more than a big stack of business cards. So when you're at a networking event, the last thing you want to do is hand out your business card. You'd be better off not even bringing business cards. Only give your business card out when it is asked for. Could you get that for me, please? Thank you. All right. We should have done the phone thing, but my phone's already gone off, so it's too late to do that. So is this making sense? So simply ask for what it is that you want. People will be happy to give it to you. So that's what I did. I prepared the soil by simply calling ahead, and I asked for introductions. Now here's the part about leaving people better than they were before you met them. This is really where we kind of dig into the appreciation marketing. Is be somebody who is easy to appreciate. And not only will you be appreciated, but you'll be showing appreciation by doing so. So when you show up at any event, serve the event. In other words, pretend you're a host, not a guest. So one of the first things I did when I walked in with Drew, I don't remember saying it, but I know I did because it's just what I do, is I said, is there anything I can do to help? Because I want to serve the event. Make that part of who you are, leaving the event better than it was before you showed up. And there's a few ways that we can do that. How are we doing on time?
Good, we're 2 minutes shy of 5 right now. So we got
Okay. All right, so bring a pen first of all. Really important that you bring a pen. When you get somebody's business card, now culturally, that's fine to do here. I've heard that there's other cultures like in Japan, it's a horrible thing to do. But that has not been my experience. I haven't run into anybody that's ever been offended by me taking a note and putting it on somebody's business card. So always bring a pen to a networking event. Make introductions. If it's an event that you've never been to, how are you going to make introductions?
Besides introducing yourself? Well, you can meet somebody and then you take them to somebody else and introduce them.
Absolutely. But again, you don't really know anybody else there. So it'd be hard to introduce somebody to somebody if you don't really know anybody else there. But let's go back to my experience with Jeff. Who did I know at that event? Jeff. What is Jeff looking for?
Clients.
He's looking for other people to join the alliance, right? So I'm out there networking. Once he introduced me to the people that I wanted to meet, now I got the opportunity to meet those I wasn't necessarily looking for, but my intention was to serve the event. So I started meeting people. And when I ran across, there were several people there who were not part of the alliance. And so I'd say, well, what are you doing here? Well, I'm just checking out the alliance. Well, me too. Have you met Jeff? And then I would take them right over to Jeff and let Jeff do his thing. That's making the event better than it would have been had I not been there. Those people may not have ever met Jeff, and Jeff was certainly appreciative that I would do that. And then befriend the loner. This may seem really counterintuitive because you're there to build a business. So if so the wallflower, that might not seem like somebody that you'd want to spend any time with. What goes around comes around, and call it karma, but always befriend the loner. So when you see that person who's over there in the corner, and you can tell they're just shy, they're a little socially awkward, go over and find out about them and their business, and just take an interest, and then help that person by introducing them around. Does that make sense? I wish I could dig into this a little bit more, but again, because of the amount of time that we have. So you don't want to be this guy. And this is what I talked about earlier, being that person who shows up just there to sell things. Have you ever been to a networking event where somebody's done that?
Oh yeah.
Like they're pursuing you to, and then you get home and now you've got a bunch of emails from them. They would love to discuss with you how their product or service would benefit you.
I don't give up my email.
Yeah, you may not, but somehow they often get. I don't give it out either for that very reason. So you don't want to be the scorched earth networker. By the way, that's Ivan Meisner, Dr. Ivan Meisner, that was a term they used in one of his books, and I simply loved it, was being a scorched earth networker. And by the way, a lot of networking events will have food, and so my advice, though I didn't follow my own advice today, is don't show up at a networking event hungry.
Yeah, I did too.
However, just as a general rule, we're all going to fall in, you know, and depending on how good the food is, right? But just remember that that's not why you're there. You're not there to eat, you're there to network. So you don't want to be this guy either.
Afterthought.
So please don't be that guy. By the way, that was me at the end of that very first networking event.
Yeah.
All right, so now you want to set the expectation for the next step. So now you've met somebody that you want to meet. What do we do next? Well, the first thing we're going to do is, I like to ask questions. Tell me about you, tell me about your business. But it's a very short conversation. If it's going to be more than 5 minutes, if that conversation is that good, it needs to be taken out into another venue. And that's where you need to schedule a coffee meeting or a cigar meeting in my case. I like to do both. So I will always ask, and it offends some people, I'm kind of surprised. If you're not into smoking cigars, you don't have to have one. But I will often ask, do you smoke cigars? And I say, hey, do you want to go to my cigar lounge? Because it's a great place to network, and it really is. So we set the expectation for the next step. So listen more than you talk, and do not spend more than 5 minutes with any one person. If it gets that close, just get their card. Say, can I get your card? Wonderful. Next thing I would strongly recommend that you do is look on the card for their address. See if there's a physical mailing address, not an email address, a physical mailing address. If there is not, ask for it. By the way, can I get your mailing address? Because I'd like to send you something. That's just how I roll. So when you're talking to them, I'd love to find out more about your business. Would you be open to getting together for coffee? Or in my case, a cigar. So if they're open to getting together for coffee, you exchange your information and you're going to set that up. So that's why you want to get that mailing address. Now it's time to follow up with that person. So you want to set the expectation for continuing that conversation. So the best way to follow up with people is the way that you are going to use consistently. So if you use email and that's what you do consistently, then continue to do that. If texting is the way that you do it, then do that. If making a phone call is the way that you do it, do that. Or if sending a card is the way that you do it, do that. Any way of consistent follow-up is better than no follow-up. Does that make sense? Because most people will not follow up, and that will kill your business. This is one of the most important things that you can possibly do. And here's the thing about this. It's something that's really easy to do, but it's so easy not to do. And you do not see the damage that it does by not following up. You'll never know exactly what that is, but you'll definitely see the results by following up. So it doesn't matter which way that you use, but personally, I like to send a card. And it's why my business is what it is, sendoutcards.com. So immediately send a card. So this is one, I don't use this particular card anymore. That's about a 12-year-old picture anyway. But that was the cover of the card. I'd send that to people. And then on the inside, and then by the way, this is an actual card that I sent to a guy, J.R. Hines in Portland, that I met at the Portland Business Alliance. And here's the verbiage. Hey J.R., it was great to meet you at the Portland Business Alliance Leads Exchange on Tuesday. I'd love to find out more about you, your employee benefits brokerage, and discover how we might refer business to each other. As you can see, I've already been to your LinkedIn profile. That's where I was able to grab that picture. How about getting together for coffee? If we haven't spoken, by the time you get this card, give me a call at my number, and we'll set a time to get together. Talk to you soon. Now, I called him the very next morning. That card was in the mail that night. I just went online and I did that card. By the way, that is my handwriting. That is my signature. But with send out cards, you can do it in your own writing with your own signature. So it took me about 1 minute to create that card.
Cheater.
It's about the result. It's not about how you did it. And by the way, I'll speak to that for just one quick second.
No, I love it.
I do believe that actual pen to paper is a better way to go, but I'm not one of those people. I mean, if I'd sent a dozen cards in my entire life prior to getting involved with send out cards, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I couldn't do it either.
But there are people who can do that. And if that's what they're doing, then I would recommend that they continue to do that, but it's physically impossible to get to everybody.
Yeah.
So this will get to everybody that you can't get with that handwritten card. All right? So the next thing is, so I called him up and we set an appointment. We got it on the calendar. But what do you think happens 50% of the time? If you call somebody or text them or whatever?
Secretary,
voicemail. People are busy, right?
Yeah, they don't.
By the way, please don't take this personal. When people don't get back in touch with you, we are just that busy. It's okay. But you know what happens 99.9% of the time, when they get this, they've already got your voicemail or your email or your text, and they'll remember that when they get this, and they call you. And what is so cool is most of the time when I meet somebody for networking, they'll bring that with them. I always take a $5 Starbucks card in there if we're going to meet for coffee, because you can do that with send out cards. You can put a gift card in there, Starbucks being one of them. All right, so the next thing is follow up with that person, call them up. So you've already got that card in the mail, but call them up. And again, call or text within 48 hours, but I would strongly recommend you do it within the next morning. And then set the agenda for that conversation. And that agenda would be, I'd love to find out more about you and your business, and that really is the agenda. So there's a number of questions that I like to ask people. In the book, Hanging Out for a Living, there's a page that has this. If you guys want to get a copy of this, and this is the networking profile, this is a series of questions that I like to ask people when I am networking. And by the way, if you are a part of BNI, then you're familiar with the gains profile. This is similar to the gains profile. This is just a bit more in-depth, but one is not necessarily any better than the other. But I like to know how people got started, and that's generally the way I like to start that conversation. Tell me about your business. How did you get started? And people will go on and on about their business. And by the way, what are you doing now? You're becoming really interesting by being interested in them. What do you love most about what you do? So tell me, what is the problem that you solve? How would I know I'm in the presence of somebody that would use your business? I'd like to know what their exit strategy is. Like, where are you going to be in 3 years? And what's your exit strategy? What's the next step after this particular business? What is the weirdest or funniest thing that has ever happened to you in your business? That's a real conversation generator. And then I'm going to finish it up by having them describe their ideal client for me. And then who by nature of what they do has a network of those people, and who by nature of what they do would have a network of those people. Because it's amazing when you have that level of conversation, the people that you will know that you can introduce this person to, now leaving them better than they were before you met them. And then the very last question on that sheet is, how can I help you? So how can I help you with your business? And 99% of the time, you won't get out of that conversation. When you ask that question, or you won't get out of that question without them saying, oh my gosh, how can I help you? And now the girls are leaning towards you. Tell me about you. Tell me about your business. And that's what happens when you have this level of conversation. Any questions at this point? I know I'm going fast, but we've got to at this point. All right, so how can you help them? Well, you can introduce them. Could you arrange a speaking engagement? So Drew didn't contact me directly. It was another guy, Ted Tanner, whom Drew had met. And Drew, because of Ted's relationship with Send Out Cards, thought Ted might be interested in doing this presentation. Ted's doing other things, and so he sent me to this. So he's added value to me in my business because he's given me the opportunity to speak to you. Maybe some media exposure. Media exposure could be lots of different things. Can I include you in my blog, or however that might take place? Or inviting them to a networking event. In the future, I want to strongly encourage you guys, when you come to an event like this, to bring somebody with you if at all possible. Always bring somebody with you that is adding to the value, and it's adding to the person that you've invited to come to that event. And then finally, I really would love for you guys to teach this to others. So there's nothing here that everything's copywritten, but go please take it and give it away, because that's how I would like to make a difference in this world, is by getting people to understand this stuff. This workshop, the workshop that I normally do goes anywhere from a minimum of 3 hours to 6 hours when we get really in-depth, but happy to do short presentations like this. I know this was a lot of stuff. And then finally, there are some books available. Steve would be happy to sell them to you. They're $24.95 if you're using a check or a credit card, or $20 cash if you'd like them, and I will be happy to sign them for you. And then also, if you would like to know more about that Send Out Cards thing, I would be happy to give any of you a free account, which means I'm going to pay for you to send a card to somebody that you care about. And that's how we do it. We can do it right on the phone. It's just an app, or you can do it on your computer, and I will pass around these. And by the way, I brought this one intentionally because that was my Thanksgiving card from a few years ago.
Eat ham.
Eat ham.
I want the green one.
So I can just pass those around. So, Drew, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Good work. So Mark, the way we can move forward with you, take action. And I forgot to pass these.
No, you're just remembering right now.
Right, yeah, that's what you do. It's
everybody have a pen?
an action form, because we are about action, and I'll flip off the camera before we do this, but we want to hear from each of you what kind of action you feel inspired to make. So be thinking about that. So certain actions you had just mentioned that, yeah, we could purchase your book. I mean, obviously you could just take any gem. I have so many gems in my head right now and say I want to take action on that.
Right, well, first of all, every bit of this goes into much more detail in the book. And the book is a story, it's a fable. It had to be a book I would read if you're familiar with Og Mandino, who wrote some wonderful business fables. So it is a business fable. And hopefully I've done a good job of making it something that's both fun and entertaining, and at once make you laugh, but it'll also make you cry. So.
Yeah. And for those online, can this book work? This book
Amazon, and it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you're in this room, the audiobook is available. So it's either the audiobook or the book.
Okay.
But it's not available any other place other than getting it directly from me, that audiobook. And the book can be purchased at Amazon.
Okay, great. And someone wants to contact you directly. What's the best way to do that?
You can call me directly at my phone number, 503-245-4450, or my email. Again, now, you guys, I don't want to get any of these emails about how your product or service can benefit me. So if you would like to find out more about any of these things, send out cards or the book, it's mark@hangingoutforaliving.com.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Drew.
All right. With this, I will say goodbye to our Facebook Live crowd there that's either currently watching us or will be watching us in the future. So I'll just keep lifting our businesses one action at a time.
Yep. Thanks, gang. Whew. It's warm in here.
Oh, and finish.